What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Talkin Football podcast. This is another draft-themed episode. We're going to keep that up. In this video, I will be going over who could get traded on draft day, mainly the first couple rounds. And yeah, let me hit the intro, and we'll get right into who could get traded. Now, before we do hop into the potential trade or who could get traded, we're going to make a quick announcement. We are going live before the first round on Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m. It's going to be around an hour live stream. I will be here. I will be going through my dogs, like my guys, answering questions you guys have, going through my mock 2.0. Addressing any trade rumors, any draft rumors, all of that stuff. And I will do that in a pre-draft show. So be there. I will put another announcement out through a short. So be on the lookout for that. But yes, we will be going live before the first round on Thursday. I'm going to keep this ticker up here so you guys remember it throughout the video. So yeah, just remember to be there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's hop into who could get traded. So we're going to start with a pretty obvious one, and that's Kayvon Thibodeau from the Giants. So the thing is with the Giants is they're in a very interesting spot, right? They could go Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders. There's a lot of different guys they could go with there. But I think the best option is probably going to be Abdul Carter. And when you have Carter, Burns, and Thibodeau, it seems on paper like a very good option. But can you rely on a guy like Thibodeau to maybe go inside? I don't think you would want to do that. I think you'd rather use Thibodeau for the value that he has. So I think you might see the Giants, let's say hypothetically they take Abdul Carter, they would use Thibodeau in their 34th overall pick to trade back up into the first round. Rumor has it that they love Jackson Dart, they love Jalen Milroe. I've heard they even like Tyler Shogg, I think is how you say his name. So they could definitely trade up for a big time not a big time but for a quarterback in the late first round, given that they need a really true option in the future. And I think that's something that the Giants want to do. They have not taken a quarterback that isn't theirs under Shane and Dable. So I think that's definitely an option here for the Giants. I think Thibodeau is definitely a guy who could get traded. He's not going to get traded for the 7th overall pick. It's just not going to happen. He's not going to go that high. I think it'll be Tibbs and a second-round pick, maybe Tibbs in a late third, or Tibbs in a third, maybe to sneak up into the second round. But I think if you're looking at day one of the draft, I think Thibodeau and the 34th overall pick maybe to move up. Now, how far that could get you, we don't know yet. That is yet to be seen. And who would be willing to make that move, we don't know yet. Maybe but a team like Cincinnati, who needs an edge rusher, would be willing to move back from 17, get an extra second-round pick, and also grab an edge rusher who will have or should theoretically have one more year on his contract and will play for you, given Trey Hendrickson's problems that he's had in terms of having a contract extension being done. So that's definitely an option there. Kayvon Thibodeau, someone to look out for as the draft approaches. Another player, which may come as a surprise, is Micah Parsons. So the Cowboys are a mess. They had a very mediocre offseason, and that's actually being nice. Did not have a good offseason. They really didn't add many players, if any. They added the only two I can think of is Javonte Williams and oh my gosh, the player from the Panthers. I think they signed. Maybe was it Miles Sanders who signed with the Cowboys? Who I'm thinking of? I don't know. They signed 2 running backs. That's all I can think of that they did. They haven't really done much else other than sign those running backs in terms of actually bringing in free agents. That was very, very low of them. I thought Jerry Jones would again actually go in. He didn't once again, and that was that a surprise? I don't know, but I think that's something that we needed to maybe think about. And now that the Cowboys are in kind of like this no man's land area where they don't really have a lot of great players, like Micah Parsons Lamb. That's pretty much it. You have a couple of good O linemen. Dak's solid. I'm a big fan of Turpin, Diggs, and Bland, but the supporting cast not very good. And I think that's a really big issue for the Cowboys. So this would be a blockbuster. Whoever you would go to, I think Parsons is a top 5 pick personally. So who would that team be? I think New England would make a ton of sense here. They need that true edge rusher. They do not have that right now, and they just signed Milton Williams. I can't think of who their edge rushers are at the top of my head, but they're not no one nearly as good as Micah Parsons. Imagine adding Parsons to that already solid team, given the free agency they had. You already have Drake May. You added Diggs, and they, like I said, you already added Milton Williams. They've added a lot of good surrounding players as well, other than those key guys that they already have. In the defense, in the back end, it's not bad. In the front end, it's really rough. A guy like Micah Parsons would draw so much attention, and he would be able to keep the Patriots in very close games. So would they be willing to trade that 4th overall pick? That's what I don't know. I think they go with Armand Membel right now. I said that in the short that I did at Gillette Stadium or outside of Gillette Stadium. There's a lot of different ways they could go. I personally would say I would at least call Dallas and say, would you do Parsons for the 4th right now? Take it or leave it. If they say absolutely, then you do it. No questions asked. But if not, then you take BPA. But the problem is at number 4, I don't think there's a big gap between the 3rd and the 4th best player in this class. Like here, Cam Ward, Hunter, and Abdul Carter. Okay, those are going to be the top 3. I like Mason Graham. Do they really need him? I like Will Johnson. Do they really need him? Jahdae Barron's great. And that's the kind of thing the players that are really good, they don't need, or wouldn't be maybe as useful as a guy like an Abdul Carter or a Travis Hunter. And that's where the Patriots fall into this pickle where you are going to need to get a flashy guy rather. Micah Parsons is that guy. And trading the 4th overall pick would be a big risk, but it's something that could happen. Where else could he go? I'm just trying to think. Not Washington. They wouldn't trade him in the division. Well, maybe they do, but I don't really know. Arizona comes to mind, maybe if they're willing to trade their 1st and their 2nd, maybe their 2nd next year. They added Josh Sweat. I think they could use Micah Parsons. Anyone could use Micah Parsons, let's be real. But I think those are the kind of teams that could look for him. It's the teams like the Patriots that could maybe win 7 games with the roster they already have. Cardinals who can win 7, 8, 9 games with the roster they already have. Adding a guy like Parsons turns New England into an immediate 9-win team. Turns Arizona into maybe a double-digit win team. That's the kind of thing you need to think about if you are thinking about where can Micah Parsons go. Does he go to one of those teams? I don't think he goes anywhere else. I don't think there's another team that really fits him as well. But I would definitely look at that. Micah Parsons would go for a big-time pick. Thibodeau, not so much. This guy, Micah Parsons, absolutely will. It would really be Parsons for a top pick plus more. I think he's definitely that good, and that's something that could definitely happen there. Next, we're going to go on to the Dolphins, where you have Jalen Ramsey as a guy. He didn't really request a trade, but they basically said, we're not going to play with each other anymore. We're not going to do this anymore. It's not going to work. And Ramsey is notoriously a hothead, is someone who a lot of teams could use. Some teams maybe not so much. This is another guy who I think would be a trade back into the 1st round type of player. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, he would be traded for a 1st round pick, but now I think the Dolphins are in a spot where they're not necessarily ready to trade up further into the 1st round. They already have a good spot. They're already at a good spot where they could go with, like I said, I mentioned before, Jahdae Barron, Will Johnson, if he's there. Those are guys that they could go with. So they don't have to trade up for Travis Hunter. I don't think that's something that they would want to do. I don't think that's a wise decision. So I think Ramsey would be Ramsey plus another pick. Maybe it's another pick next year. Maybe if they have, I believe they have their 2nd round pick, they would use that to trade up into the 1st round. Who would that be for? There's a lot of solid offensive linemen in that late 1st, early 2nd range, where guys like Donovan Jackson, Zabel, guys like Tyler Booker from Alabama. Those are the kind of guys that could go in that area. And given their desire to obviously protect Tua after his many concussions, you might as well use a guy like Jalen Ramsey to trade up, especially if you already are going to get most likely a corner. In mock draft 2.0, I have them getting Jahdae Barron, so I think that checks out there. So you replace Jalen Ramsey and you protect Tua. I think that's something that they would want to do there. So that would be something to keep an eye on for. I don't know if he necessarily gets traded now. I think he might be an OTA trade or like a cut down day where they're like, okay, we got to get rid of Ramsey. He's not going to be on this team next year, and we're not going to cut him for nothing. Let's trade him. Let's get some draft capital back. But if the right offer's there, pull the trigger. And I think that's something that the Miami Dolphins are definitely going to think about. Another player who they need to think about is Tyreek Hill, who has been all over the rumor mill for the last like year and a half, pretty much, where it's like, oh, he doesn't want to be in Miami, doesn't want to be in Miami, blah 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 blah. I believe he said, I don't remember when it was. I think he said that he didn't want to be in Miami anymore, and then the next day, the Dolphins Chris Greer, I believe his name is, talked to him and said Tyreek said he wants to stay here. There's still going to be interest for Tyreek Hill since he's so freaking fast, and obviously he didn't have as good of a year as many teams hoped, or many fantasy owners, I should say, or many people rather hoped that he did, but it was still not a bad season. He could definitely go to a team like the Cowboys who need a really true deep threat because Turpin is not that guy. Turpin's an underneath guy at best. He will use his speed as in a go route, but I don't know if he's that good to consistently win against players consistently on man-to-man coverage. Tyreek Hill is one of those guys where he can do that, and I think that's a really important thing to think about. How can Dallas use a guy like Tyreek Hill? I think they can use him very wisely. Because imagine CeeDee Lamb has been under so much pressure lately to perform because you have a guy like Brandon Cooks. He doesn't perform as good as he really should, and that's not really his fault because he's a veteran guy, right? So that's not something that's necessarily his fault. Adding a guy like Tyreek Hill to an offense that already has Ferguson, who I really like, who already has, like I mentioned before, the solid offensive lineman, CeeDee Lamb, Turpin. They already have players that can support Prescott. Adding Hill would make that way, 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 way better. So that will they do a Hill for Parsons? I don't know. That's something that would be a wild trade. Maybe Hill in a first for Parsons in a second, maybe. I don't know if I'm on the Cowboys. I don't think I'm doing that. I think you need more for Parsons, but that's something you can think about. Are the Cowboys willing to maybe instead of doing an experiment pick like a guy, maybe they like Matthew Golden more than Egbuka. I think Egbuka, who is a very great player in my opinion, maybe could go to the Cowboys at pick 13, 12, 13, 14. I don't remember what their pick is. I believe it's pick 12. Are they willing to maybe have a guy who they could develop, or will they just spend that pick on a guy like Tyreek Hill? That's the kind of thing we're waiting to see. I don't think I've heard any other rumors on that end. Maybe the Eagles. I'm not totally sure, but again, that's the kind of stuff that we were waiting to see on draft day, and that's what makes draft day so much fun, really. Next up, we have Trey Hendrickson, and this is not coming up. There we go. Okay. Next up, we have Trey Hendrickson, and Hendrickson has been it's been a big standoff in the contract department for Hendrickson and the Bengals. Based on what I know, I don't think it's going to be the point where he's going to hold out in the season. He might hold out up until preseason week 3, but I think at this point, he's probably not going to hold out into the regular season, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Again, though, this is a defense that sucked last year. They were horrible, 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 horrible. They got burnt on almost every single game they played. And they still almost made the playoffs, which is bonkers to think about. That's how good Joe Burrow was. You need a good defense. You need a better defense. Why don't you use Hendrickson to get another first-round pick, get another or second-round pick? You maybe use your second-round pick to trade up for another Hendrickson and a second to trade up for another first-round pick. Because there are a lot of good edge rushers late down the board. You have Izaraku from BC, Jalen Walker from Georgia. I'm just thinking of them off the top of my head. Shamar Stewart, I don't know if he'd be there. Nick Skirton, I think is his name, is another player from TAMU who could definitely go in that range. Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, those guys, those are all players that could definitely find their way into the first round if a team like the Bengals is desperate enough. And to connect on those OSU guys, they already have the Ohio connection. So I think that would be even better for Cincinnati to kind of build some culture there. I think I personally, if I'm the Bengals, I'm moving on from Hendrickson. I'm finding at least one team that needs an edge rusher that's willing to pay him. Whether I don't know who that would necessarily be. Maybe a team like the Eagles. I don't know if they would. Maybe a team like the Packers would make sense. That would definitely make sense for Hendrickson. Um, I'm just trying to think of who else would have that. Trey Hendrickson, who, I mean, a lot of teams would like him. I think he was close to leading this league in sacks last year, or he did. But he's definitely, because he's a little bit older and he obviously wants the contract, he's going to probably end up being a second round, third round value. So maybe add Hendrickson in a second. You can trade back him to the first round. Maybe just Hendrickson himself will get you a second round pick for Cincinnati, and to grab another defensive player. And right now, I don't remember who I had them taking. I had them taking edge rusher. I don't remember who exactly it is. Maybe it was Jalen Walker who I'm thinking of, or Shamar Stewart who I had them taking. But at 17. So guess what? You use Hendrickson and a second maybe to trade back up into the first round, or maybe Hendrickson will be enough to get you into the first round, and maybe you grab a guy like Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky, or maybe a Trey Amos from Ole Miss, who have been gaining a lot of steam down the stretch. That's the kind of thing to think about here if you're Cincinnati. So I guess that's something we'll have to wait and see in terms of what will happen there. Who will be available on draft night, who won't be. I've heard things about George Pickens. I don't buy into that. I don't think he's going to be I don't think he's going to be traded. Excuse me. Kirk Cousins could be. I think Atlanta wants to keep him though for the time being in case Penix doesn't pan out. I'm just trying to think of who else. I've heard Evan Neal maybe, with whatever interest he would have. I don't know why he would have any to begin with. I'm just trying to think, because I've seen a big list of players who could get traded, but those are the ones off the top of my head who I remember. There's a lot more, and there's a lot of draft day shockers that you can see. If you remember, a few years ago, AJ Brown went from the Titans to the Eagles when no one was expecting that to happen. So there's a lot of things that can happen on draft night. Expect the unexpected. That is my word of advice to you guys. That's where we're going to end this episode. Remember, Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m., I will be streaming before the first round. And so make sure you tune into that. I will post another short, most likely, about that, so you guys don't forget. This is Talkin Football, and that's what I say about that.